There is something deeply wrong with the bread on your table. For thousands of years, bread was called the staff of life. It built civilizations, fed armies, and sustained families. But today, that same word, bread, describes something that can inflame your gut, spike your blood sugar, and leave you hungry an hour later. What the hell changed? In medieval Europe, a hardworking peasant might eat 2 to 3 pounds of bread every single day. It was the fuel they used to build the cathedrals that still stand today, and they thrived on it. There was no epidemic of diabetes, no gluten sensitivity crisis, no inflammatory bowel disease affecting millions. Fast forward to today. 1 in 3 adults is pre-diabetic, and autoimmune diseases have exploded. Your grandfather ate bread his whole life without a problem. The answer isn't that you're weak or your gut is defective. The answer is that modern bread is not real bread. It's an industrialized food product designed for profit, not nutrition. And the medieval peasant you've been taught to pity knew 3 secrets about wheat that the food industry desperately wants you to forget. To understand what we lost, we have to go back to a time before industrial factories and chemical additives. The medieval baker was a master of a craft that worked in harmony with nature, and in doing so, they unlocked the full power of the grain. It all starts with the grain. The wheat that built the medieval world was fundamentally different from the uniform, high-yield wheat that dominates our fields today. They relied on what we now call landrace varieties, genetically diverse grains that were adapted over centuries to local soil and climates. While the wealthy elite preferred bread from early forms of wheat, the common person's loaf was a dense, dark bread made from hardier grains like rye, barley, spelt, or a mix of grains. This included what we now call ancient grains, like einkorn and emmer. These weren't scientifically hybridized crops. They were rugged, resilient, and nutritionally complex in a way that has been bred out of modern wheat. Einkorn, for example, has a simple genetic structure with only 14 chromosomes compared to the 42 found in modern semi-dwarf wheat. That genetic complexity came with a trade-off. Studies show that the gluten in ancient wheats, like einkorn, is often structured differently, making it easier to digest for many people with non-celiac sensitivities. In contrast, modern wheat is a product of the Green Revolution. It was an agricultural miracle, bred for one thing: maximum yield per acre. Not nutrition, not digestibility, yield. The result was a grain perfect for the factory, but not for the human body. As the starch content went up, the concentration of minerals like zinc, iron, and magnesium went down. The first secret was this: they began with a diverse, nutrient-dense raw material that hadn't been engineered into something our digestive systems no longer recognize as food. Once harvested, the grain was taken to the mill. And here we find the second secret: stone grinding. Before industrial steel roller mills, flour was made by slowly grinding the entire grain between 2 massive millstones. It was a slow, cool process that preserved the integrity of the wheat kernel. A wheat kernel has 3 parts: the bran, fiber and minerals; the germ, healthy fats, vitamin E, antioxidants; and the endosperm, mostly starch. The medieval stone mill ground all 3 parts together. The result was a true whole grain flour that contained the complete nutritional profile of the grain. The fiber from the bran slowed down sugar absorption, and the oils from the germ provided essential nutrients. The modern roller mill, introduced in the late 19th century, was an instrument of aggressive efficiency. Its purpose was to strip away the bran and the germ. Why? Because the oils in the germ go rancid, which shortens shelf life. By removing them, you create a sterile, white flour, pure starch that can sit on a shelf for months. From an industrial perspective, it was perfect. From a nutritional perspective, it was a catastrophe. The nutrient stripping was so severe that by the 1940s, governments mandated that this dead flour be enriched with a few synthetic vitamins and iron. It was a tacit admission of guilt, an industrial patch job for a problem industry itself had created. The second secret was to use a slow, cool milling process that preserved the entire grain, delivering a flour that was a complete food, not a nutritionally bankrupt powder. This brings us to the third and most transformative secret: slow, wild fermentation. Medieval bakers didn't have packets of commercial yeast. They used a starter, a living culture of wild yeasts and beneficial bacteria passed down for generations. This is what we now call the sourdough method, and it is a masterpiece of nutritional alchemy. When this starter was mixed with flour and water, it didn't just make the bread rise, it kicked off a long, slow fermentation, often lasting 12 to 24 hours. During this time, the bacteria began to pre-digest the flour. This is the key. They systematically break down compounds that are hard for the human gut to handle. The most important is phytic acid, an anti-nutrient that binds to minerals like iron, zinc, and magnesium and blocks their absorption. A proper sourdough fermentation activates an enzyme called phytase, which neutralizes the phytic acid. Studies have shown this process can reduce phytic acid by over 60%, and in some cases up to 90%, unlocking the minerals in the grain and making them available to your body. The fermentation also breaks down the complex proteins, including gluten, making the bread far easier to digest, and it lowers the bread's glycemic index. The acids produced by the bacteria slow the rate at which starches are absorbed, preventing the blood sugar spike and crash common with modern bread. The third secret was that medieval bakers used time and biology to transform the grain into a digestible, nutrient-dense superfood before it ever hit the oven. This was the story of bread for millennia, but this staff of life was about to be broken, not by famine, but by the relentless march of industrial progress. The values of the artisan, quality, and nutrition were replaced by the values of the factory: speed, efficiency, and profit. As we saw, the industrial roller mill stripped flour of its nutrients to create a shelf-stable, pure white powder. What remained was basically pure starch. Then, it's often bleached with chemicals like benzoyl peroxide to make it even whiter. This is the enriched wheat flour you see on ingredient labels, a code for wheat that's been stripped of everything valuable, then injected with synthetic vitamins to meet legal minimums. The second villain was the invention of commercial bakers' yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. The slow, patient art of sourdough was a bottleneck in the factory system. With commercial yeast, a loaf could be mixed, risen, and baked in under 3 hours. The factory had triumphed over time, but this speed came at a massive nutritional cost. The entire pre-digestion phase was lost. Phytic acid remained intact. The complex gluten proteins were not broken down. And to mimic the texture of a slow-fermented loaf, a cocktail of chemical dough conditioners was added. Ingredients like azotocarbonamide, a chemical also used in yoga mats, became standard. Preservatives like calcium propionate were added to prevent mold. Our bread was no longer flour, water, and salt. It had become an ultra-processed industrial product designed to simulate real bread while prioritizing shelf life above all else. The great betrayal was complete. So what happens inside your body when you eat this modern imposter? Let's do a direct comparison. When you eat a slice of typical supermarket bread, you get a massive blood sugar spike. The IMI glycemic index of white bread is around 75, which is higher than table sugar. Your pancreas dumps insulin to handle the flood, and the inevitable crash follows, leaving you tired, foggy, and hungry again an hour later. This cycle repeated over years, is a direct path toward insulin resistance. The active phytic acid can block mineral absorption from your meal, and the undigested, reactive gluten proteins can cause bloating, gas, and inflammation. Now contrast this with a slice of true, slow fermented sourdough. The glycemic index is low, often around 54, providing stable, sustained energy. The phytic acid is neutralized, so the minerals are bioavailable. The gluten is predigested, making it far easier on your gut. The medieval loaf was food that nourished, while the modern loaf is a source of chronic, low-grade stress on the body. The solution: how to eat bread again. The story doesn't have to end here. You can reclaim this lost wisdom. First, seek out true sourdough. The word sourdough on a label is often a lie. Look for a simple ingredient list: flour, water, salt. That's it. Ask the baker about their fermentation time. If it's 12 hours or more, you're on the right track. Second, look for better flour. Choose bread made from 100% stone ground, whole grain flour. Even better, find breads made with heritage grains like spelt, einkorn, rye, or emmer. The nutty, complex flavor is a revelation. Third, and most powerfully, bake your own. This is the ultimate way to reclaim control over your food. Creating a sourdough starter is simple, and when you bake your own, you control every variable: the flour, the fermentation, and the total absence of chemical additives. It's a slow, meditative process that reconnects you to your food. The story of bread is a mirror. For millennia, we understood it as a living food. We honored the grain, the mill, and the magic of fermentation. In return, we got a superfood that built civilizations. Then we traded that wisdom for industrial speed and profit. We swapped nutrient density for shelf life. We replaced a living food with a sterile product, and our health is paying the price. When people started getting sick, the industry blamed the victims. You're gluten intolerant. You're sensitive. No, you're having a normal reaction to an abnormal food. But that ancient knowledge isn't lost. It's alive in a handful of heritage grain, in the powder from a stone mill, and in a bubbling sourdough starter. The bread that built empires may have vanished from our shelves, but the knowledge of how to make it is still here. We stopped making bread. We started manufacturing a product that looks like bread. And every time you choose real bread over the industrial imitation, you reclaim a piece of that ancient power.